Hey guys, be live here in about 3 minutes. How's everybody doing tonight? Alright, so when we left off last night, we had just arrived on site. Our dwarves are here with our wagon in our forest covered with snow and a frozen stream and ponds. Now, as before, if I dive down 1 sea level into the rock, you can see the actual frozen water there. Just south of where we actually are, there's some right here. We gotta be careful. Now, we want to be cautious about those for a reason. If a dwarf is standing on the middle of an ice blocked wall like that, and the spring thaw comes, it doesn't thaw gradually, allowing the dwarf ample time to scamper to safety. No, no. Thawing in Dwarf Fortress is instantaneous, and your dwarf will plummet to the bottom of the pond. The surprising dunk will result in a collision with the bottom. He'll likely have all the air knocked out of him, and you can imagine how that's going to go afterward. So we'll want to make sure that, in general, we keep our dwarves off the pond whenever possible. In the meantime, we need to think about what we're going to do when we set up. So I initially said, we probably would look at setting up our fortress somewhere up here or over here. This pond is really inconveniently located, unfortunately, but that's just the way it goes. Um, but we should be able, I think, to squeeze it in right here. So let's take a look there, see if I can fit that in real quick. Let me do some measuring here. Okay, so yeah, we can easily fit a 15 in here, no problem. Okay, good, good. Means we could put it in here too. And that's closer to the river, which I like. Okay, so let's do it there. First things first, I'm going to need to mark this area that's where we're eventually going to build as full of trees that we don't want to have here. They need to be removed. Now, we really don't need all of that wood, but I do need this area here cleared so that we can build over it and under it. Oops. So we can build over and under it. And once we've got that done, we'll delve down and make our fortress right below this spot, basically. Now, the good news is that's not perfectly centered, but fairly centered inside our embark. You don't want to be building your fortress way out here on the edges. First of all, there's a boundary area where it really won't let you build a lot of stuff, and second of all, if you're near the edge, when invaders or migrants or whatever arrives, it's right there next to your front door. You're not going to have a chance to react to it before it just walks inside and makes itself at home. So keeping ourselves a little bit back from the edges of the map is a good thing. Um, in this case, we'll be located right here, just north of where this stream is flowing. That'll give us an ample source of water with no problem. We could use that for filling our wells, setting up our hospital, and so forth. Now, when we embarked, this time out, we did bring two miners and two picks. And if you have miners and picks, this is the time to get them running. If you brought axes, your wood choppers would get to work chopping wood. And since we don't have any wood cutters or axes, we can't actually cut wood yet. So we won't be able to excavate our farms just yet because we'll need to be able to cut the trees above them first. And I'll explain why in just a moment. What we will do is go ahead and set up our initial industry and get some plan for how this is actually all going to be laid out when we do our little dig here. So first things first, we need our down staircases. And you can do your fortress in a whole lot of designs. And you will find that if you watch prior fortresses of mine, I tend to favor what is effectively an upright cylinder, like a telephone pole or a skyscraper that's round. The intent there is that everything that's on a given floor is as close to the staircases as I can get it without being crushed together, and that travel time between floors is minimized. You could have your floors connected by a giant spiral ramp that went around the entire outside of your fortress. It's doable. And build in an interior cylinder that's accessed only by that exterior ramp staircase that goes all the way up and down. It'll be a little harsher on your pathfinding because of all the extra distance dwarves are going to travel to go up and down floors, but you could do it. I've seen designs where you build your workshops and your uh, stockpiles directly above and below one another so that a dwarf who's working takes one step, goes up a staircase, and grabs his items from the stockpile, goes back down the staircase and works on it, takes one step and drops it off in the goes takes one step, goes down a staircase and drops it off in a stockpile right below his workshop. There's lots of ways to do this, but what you'll tend to see me do over and over and over because it is reliable and it will work just about anywhere is to simply dig a vertical staircase down through the ground 3 by 3 in height. Now we can go down to 15, z minus 15 here, minus 15. We know that that's as deep as we can go before we know we might run into the caverns. So that last floor could conceivably hit the caverns, but nothing before that should. Now, this will also allow us, hopefully, to find where our light aquifer is. If our miners are doing a good job, they'll be able to get through this and get dug down to the caverns before we have to worry about flooding. If not, or if the aquifers may be a little more advanced than I'm hoping, then we'll have to do some things to allow the miners to finish the tunnel and drain the aquifer out until we can get it walled off and sealed away. Now, long term, the aquifer is going to be a benefit for us. We could use it effectively as an infinite internal water supply that enemies can't intrude upon. The stream can be used, but the stream does have its own weaknesses. Enemies can swim in. Some enemies don't breathe. Undead, for example, have no problem walking on a stream riverbed, walking right in through your plumbing and coming out through your well. So we'll do some things to prevent that, but there's a limit to how far we can take those given the presence of things like building destroyers. So it's important to think about an aquifer being a perfectly safe way to supply water for your wells and eventually your hospital. Now, we've designated our trees. We've got our central staircase shaft is designated here, but we need to get tools for our woodcutters to use. So we're going to build some workshops, and specifically, I'm going to build a metalsmith's forge to start making those axes. Now, I want to that would be centered. That's on the edge. That should be far enough out. I'll double check it, but that should be where I want to build it for right now. And the reason I'm building this as far out, I need a smelter as well. Again, with the gabbro, so that we're not using up our only source of coke. Now, let me kind of cheat here for a moment. We'll pretend like we're building a farm plot. I'm not really going to build a farm plot. I just want to expand this up so you can kind of see it. This red area here is where my two workshops are going to be built here. These two workshops are side by side. Um, Now, this area is away from my fortress staircase for a reason. I do not want to um, bring this back down to size here for a moment. Make this nice and 5 by 5. Okay. So now when I move this guy around, you can imagine that staircase as sitting right in the middle of a 5 by 5 block. And if I do that, then another 5 by 5 block of that, north of that, is where the edge of my interior room will be. If I dig this out as a circle like I had before. So I want to build these beyond the edge of that so that they're not overhanging my eventual workshop. And there's a reason. As soon as these trees are cut, I'm going to start digging ditches and holes and putting chunks in the ground. And I want to make sure that I don't have to move these workshops while that work is ongoing. Um, we will actually, if there is sufficient soil, build several levels of farms. And this top level of farms, which won't actually be on the surface, it will actually be one level below the surface, will be for our surface crops. We will dig it out, floor it over, and use it for our surface crops. And if there's a second level below that, then we'll use that for our subsurface crops. And if there's a third, then we'll use that for pasture space for our animals. And we'll have all of that interior where it's not exposed to the invaders. You don't have to run the risk of somebody getting into your courtyard or a flying enemy coming over your walls. Inside is always safer. So we've got the two workshops set up, our smelter and our metalsmith's forge. We need to make sure that we have somebody set up to do that is job. So this is where therapist finally comes in. We connect to Dwarf Fortress and it lists all of our dwarves, and then we can get all kinds of information about them. I'll go into that in more detail later. But it also lists all of our dwarves' skills. You can see them here as numbers. And what labors they're assigned, that's the filled in boxes. That's jobs that they'll do. So you can actually take at a glance and see what all of our dwarves are actually doing. Which ones are skilled in which labors, if you will. Now, none of our dwarves actually have furnace operation. I didn't actually take it for any of them. We can assign it to everybody. Remember, all dwarves do all jobs to a basic level of competence. There's no such thing as a screw up job from a dwarf. Screw up for a dwarf is normal quality. We'll give them all furnace operating, except for the miners. So back over here, these two guys here, they have mining. We don't want to give them furnace operations. They're going to be busy elsewhere anyway, so they're not going to have time to do that. They're going to grab picks, and they're immediately going to start on those central staircase for us. But these other guys, I need somebody to do that. Now, not the weaponsmith either. I don't want him making ore into bars. I want him making bars into stuff. So we'll need to keep him on weaponsmithing. Now, once you've made those changes on the grid, make sure you commit them. This is like a temporary view here, and then you have to actually commit your changes back to Dwarf Fortress. And generally speaking, I recommend you leave Dwarf Fortress paused when you're changing your labors. You don't have to, but since you're screwing with Dwarf Fortress's memory state, it's better if Dwarf Fortress isn't trying to change it at the same time you're trying to update it as well. It's just safer that way. Now, the things you're changing aren't the sort of things that Dwarf Fortress should care about you changing. It should be behind the scenes and safe, but, well, screwing with memory states could cause race conditions, and we don't want to get into that now, do we? Hey, Valdemar, welcome back. All right, so we've got our workshop set up, we've got our labors picked out. What are we missing? Oh, right, architecture, the grand stopper. One of the labors that's in here is architecture. And while having well designed buildings makes them more attractive and more valuable and makes your dwarves happier to live in them in a sense, it's not really essential that you have a skilled architect to build your first forges. However, it is required that you have somebody doing the architecture job, or no forges will ever be built. And lastly, we'll need to have somebody doing masonry. But as with furnace operation, I don't want those jobs to be done by those three dwarves who have special high priority labors to be done, so I'm turning them off. Now, our dwarves will immediately set out, and whoever's doing masonry will immediately start hauling things to start uh, producing weapons. Our miners are going to take off, grab their picks, and start working on our staircases, and we'll start getting our fortress dug out. Okay, guys, punch the clock. It is officially, what, 3 hours and 47 minutes from when we originally started our first broadcast. We are finally now actually playing in the sense of the game is actually running Dwarf Fortress. Okay, damp stone located. Remember earlier we were talking about those announcements? So somewhere down here they've figured out that some of this stone is damp. If I tell it to dig it out, you'll notice it flashes for me and lets me know that this is in fact damp stone. What that means is we are actually going to go through our aquifer layer here. We are penetrating the area of the aquifer. There'll be some more disruptions here as we do this, but that's okay. Depending, yeah, see, it's another level down. So this aquifer is at least 2 levels tall now, so we need to make sure we drill this out as well. And we'll let them go again. And they'll come along and punch some more holes here. And we have to go down again and see if they've actually managed to do this. Looks like part of this may be aquifer as well. So far, so good. Now, this is a light aquifer. Remember, a heavy aquifer, we would have already flooded out. We would not be digging through the heavy aquifer in this fashion. Our dwarves would be drowning very quickly if we tried. A heavy aquifer can be so heavy. Ooh, wow, there's a lot of aquifer tiles here. This is going to be fun. Uh, Now, what I'm hoping to do is get to the bottom of this where we can effectively punch a drain in the bottom of it. And then if the aquifer decides it wants to flood or be obnoxious, we won't care because it can simply drain its water out the bottom of a shaft and into a big open cavern where it's somebody else's problem to deal with. Oof. Oh, maybe that was up higher. 8 levels. Oof. Thank God it's not a heavy aquifer. That's all I'm going to say. Now let's go in a little closer here and take a closer look. What's happening on the floor above us is that the water that's trickling out of the aquifer has started to accumulate at the bottom of our staircase shaft. If it gets too deep before our dwarves get to the bottom, they'll be unable to finish the shaft. They'll actually start canceling jobs and saying, "Hey, I can't mine when I'm underwater, you dummy." Our goal is to get the shaft at the bottom and hopefully drain it into the caverns before that happens. Now, if that's not going to happen because, say, for example, it starts to get too deep, then we'll look at digging a larger area to evaporate the water a little bit, or to spread it out so that we can continue downward without having so much water in our shaft. But we've got about 6 more levels to go before we're possibly going to hit anything that resembles the caverns. So, and every time the water drops down a level, the next level down becomes damp, and we have to redesignate over and over again repeatedly. That's just the way it goes. Now, see how this is now starting to get to where it's fours? That's where we're starting to get into a problem now. It's starting to get deep enough that we're going to have problems for our dwarves digging it out. Three is still, three depth here like this is standing, four depth is swimming. That's your boundary. Now, as it spreads out, that little trickle of water is now no longer swimming pool, it's more wading pond. And that's what we want. As long as they can keep spreading the water out a little bit and keep digging down, we're getting closer and closer to our caverns. And the more they spread out the water by finally getting back to the 3x3 staircase design, the better. We'll just keep dropping down in the world here. Now, let me pause it here for a second, go back up to the top where the wagon is, and let's take a look at our workshops. Did we get those done? Good, good. Now, let's get the virtuous cycle started here. Remember, we brought a unit of coke. That's the first thing we've got to use. And you could smelt limonite ore, or malachite ore, galena ore, cassiterite ore. Don't do any of those. It's terrible. Don't do it. Make coke from coal. That should be the first thing you do. You should hit enter. You should put it on repeat. You should do it again. Add that same job again. And then put a job on. Actually, we don't have to have the first, we don't have to have it repeat twice. We could do that and then repeat. And the reason I'm doing this is so that you don't screw yourself, in essence. Right after that, we're then immediately going to turn around and say, well, we want to make bronze bars from ore. Now, I have some limonite, so I'm actually going to make some iron bars here in a minute. But we brought all this bronze ore with us, and this is how we get it consumed. The reason we do two of these to get us started is that this first one will use up our only unit of fuel. We want to make sure that that happens to create more fuel. And the first job we do once we create more fuel is to create more fuel so that we have a small surplus on hand before the cycle starts. Now, you don't really need this much. Technically, if you do it right and you're careful, making one unit of fuel like this and then going right into bars and then back into fuel is safe. But if your metalsmith gets a hold of some of it in that process and makes something out of something, you may end up using all the coke and your cycle will get interrupted. You won't have any fuel to run it. You'll have to build another workshop to start making more fuel. We don't want to do that. We want to be doing this as fast as possible. So we've got our two workshops set up to run. Those guys will come along and get started making our fuel for us. Let's go down here and oops, go back down here and take a look at our staircase again. And down they dive, down they dive. Level 15 here. We're almost there now. And we are at the bottom of what they think is the world for the moment. We'll just give it a few more levels down the hole here. We apparently have a few more than 15, and it could be a lot more than 15. Remember, that's just the minimum that we allow ourselves here. Now we're starting to get to where even when it's all dug out, it's still too full to actually do anything. So we're going to cheat here. And I'm going to spread this bad boy out a little bit. And in so doing, some of this water will bleed out effectively on this floor. And spread out. I'm hoping. Come on, guys. May have to go up one floor. But there's enough water in there now, they may not be able to do it. I may have waited a little long. Don't! We can still get it. It's just more annoying. So we'll punch a little hole here, and that will actually give it a little more area to spread water out, and then they should start digging because there should be enough threes there to get the job done. Just enough to get them going. That's all I need. I got to be careful because this one in the center could end up unsuspended if we're not careful. There we go. Come on, guys. You got to dig now. Yeah, good, good. Not going to get it done before it... Okay, fine. I don't really want to do that, but we're going to have to because I have not yet hit the caverns yet, and I have to get some more room in here. Now, every one of these tiles I spread out. Will give us a little bit of evaporation room, if you will, for the level below. And if the water isn't trickling in too quickly, then they should start picking up the jobs that are down here. And if I can get this spread out, we can continue on down. But I'm starting to think these guys aren't quite fast enough to get this done by themselves. So, let's go back up top. We have 7 dwarves. We brought 2 picks. We need at least 5 more. So we can have every dwarf mining if we need to. And it wouldn't hurt to have some access to cut all these trees that we're sitting around with. So let's go back downstairs while they're doing that. Are we getting it spread out enough? Nope. They're too slow. That's what I was afraid of. Okay, so plan B. Go back upstairs, figure out where the aquifer is coming in at, and mine that out. Since we couldn't win the race, we need to figure out where the water coming from. It's coming from above there. Whew, light aquifer, but it's deep. Okay. So we'll dig this out. Okay, dig circle is one of my favorite little utilities in DF Hack. It basically allows you to designate a radius or a diameter for a circle, and it will automatically designate it for digging for you. So I put it in the center, tell it I want this room to be 15 units across, and they come along and we have it. Now, the other advantage to getting this mined out on this floor is we'll use it for temporary storage space and move in our wagon stuff. Oh, they finally caught up. Ha! Finally. That's why. I was like, why wouldn't it turn that off? Because I hit the caps lock key. Shame on me. There we go. And we'll just let them spread that out a little bit. I don't think it will spread out enough to actually evaporate, but it should spread out enough that we can cut down on how much is drowning us. And upstairs, oops, upstairs, they should have our picks ready almost. Oh, must have run out of bronze. We don't have enough bronze yet. He's still making enough bronze to get it done. We do have battle axes now, though. So we'll pop back over here and set ourselves up a couple of woodcutters. Since those guys have furnace operating skill, we'll leave them to do the furnace operating, and we'll let these guys do the wood cutting, and then hopefully we've got everybody spread out a little more. Now I realize I didn't bring a carpenter with me. Shame on me. Told you I'd figure out what we overlooked in the next episode. Sure enough. Okay, now did you see that? That flash where we went from frozen ground to puddles of water at 7 depth? Yeah, that's the spring thaw. And if your dwarves are located over water when it happens, they're probably going to drown before they get out. We'll go into restricting that later. For right now, we don't have any water between the wagon and us where it's going to put our dwarves in any danger. But if your dwarves are out gallivanting around across the ice in the middle of winter, be very careful that you know where the edges of the water are come spring. It is possible for your wagon to embark on ice, and that is particularly unfortunate. Okay, still getting it kind of spread out. I'm going to turn this floor off for a moment. I don't need them to dig that out. I just needed to see what the boundaries were, and I left it on. I do need them to dig this one out if we can do it. And now I need to see if we're still leaking or if that is the only aquifer tiles. If we see water drop through here, then we'll know that there's aquifer tiles here as well. Now, by cutting this out wider like we've done, it forces the aquifer to have to flood this floor before it can get to the staircase. And if you're mining down through it, this is the easiest way to prevent your aquifer from flooding the staircase in the first place. But if you spread it out on this bottom floor, it will also evaporate and fail to spread back into the staircase, which accomplishes their same goal. And occasionally, you'll be lucky enough to have fast miners in a slow aquifer, and you'll reach the bottom before the aquifer can have a chance to actually flood. Come on, guys, what are we doing here? Notice as the water moves around, these twos keep spreading out and spreading out. Eventually, they become ones. Any place that there's a one depth water will evaporate over time. So we'll start to see these tiles of water drying up and leaving mud behind them. The aquifer can't sustain this open area by itself. It could flood our staircase because it's nice and confined, but it can't flood this entire floor quickly enough to offset our miners. And the rate of evaporation. All right, so now that we've got this kind of cleared up to where it's not a problem threatening our fortress anymore, over a long enough period of time, obviously, even a slow aquifer can leak enough water to eventually flood a fortress up to the level where it's producing the water. So, long term, that could be a long term problem. Back to the big dig. Now we'll go back to punching down through that staircase and hopefully. Yeah, see, I'm starting to think this is aquifer. Pretty sure it's all going to be, and we're just going to have a big mess of aquifer to clean up before we're done. Yep, definitely aquifer. Expand those staircases back out so they don't have that crimp in them as we go back down. And we'll come back through and clean this up, but it should get some of our guys off and running. And now up here on the surface, we've harvested out all of these trees that were in our way before. Now remember, our eventual goal is to have a room that looks vaguely like this. But what we're going to do is we're going to cheat. We're going to remove these sections here and here and here and here. And we're going to dig them out from above like a ditch. So these are basically big square ditches we're going to dig out here. And the reason is we're actually going to farm at the bottom of those ditches and put a ceiling on them before we're done. And get our miners running again. I'm guessing we've got aquifer running down through a lot of this stuff. That'll be fun. A lot deeper aquifer than I usually would bother to deal with, but that's okay. Now, as you can see, we're on our way back down again, and once again, the aquifer is starting to flood out again. We're crossing our fingers that we're actually going to hit tunnel down here somewhere. So let's take a peek. Now, this is an interesting little trick you can pull called Dwarven Radar. If we tell it to build a farm plot, and we make that farm plot as big as we can make it, you'll notice it tells me I can't build it anywhere around where I'm at. That's okay. We don't expect to. But then we can take this farm plot and we can use it to look around in the dark. For example, if we pretend for a moment that the fog of war isn't there, and we go all the way up to the surface, some of this area becomes buildable. It tells me some of this stuff could be plantable if I did certain things, yada, 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 but it changes color, and it warns me that there's area there to build in. So we can actually go down through the world looking for how deep we'd have to go. Aha. At 26, there's definitely some land. So we're getting close. We're getting real close to the places where we're going to start to find the caverns. Might still be a problem because we've still got this staircase that they're just not digging out quick, and he's actually going to fall asleep right there. Good job. Fall asleep on a staircase flooding with water. Bonus points for dwarven brains there, boys. But that does mean that we are actually causing ourselves a problem here because we have not gotten. Boy. Okay, now it really won't dig out all that room, and normally I would tell you not to be digging out this much room this early anyway, but we need to get these aquifers under control. So, take a peek in here. Tell him to make some picks because he actually canceled those jobs when there wasn't any bronze available. And he should come running like the streak here to start producing us some bronze picks so that we can get the rest of our miners involved. Now they'll safely mine out this surface layer because I did not hollow the ground underneath it. It's solid down here. So they're digging down into solid ground every time. So why am I doing this? What the hell's the point of all this? Okay, well here, let's let them finish up these last couple of squares. Okay, now we've got to remove the ramps. Like so. Give our dwarf something to do here. Is that cave moss? Downy grass. Isn't that pretty? Grass. So by mining this back, it will kind of slow down the rate at which the aquifer. There, see, they're getting some of this stone cleared away from the staircase. It will decrease the rate at which the aquifer is actually draining directly into the staircase and causing our problem. And the hope is we can clear back enough that we gain a little bit of lead time on the aquifer. This is actually pretty fast for a light aquifer. Probably has to do with the depth of the actual aquifer tiles, is how many there are top to bottom. But as you can see, that's pretty aggressive. Whew, a lot of aquifer. So I think we're going to cheat long term. Honestly, can't remember the last time I wasn't able to dig one of these out fast enough. It's going to be fun. Now, obviously, if you're embarking in evil terrain, this is going to present quite an obstacle for your dwarves, since they now have to deal with the undead trying to kill them at the same time they're actually able to dig out a flooding home. Keep that in mind when you're embarking, if you're planning to embark in someplace with more challenging surroundings than we have here. Now, these farm plots I'm planting here are for our farmer to come along and get some crops going. He's going to move everything out and get his farm plots up and running. There we go. Now that they've got those last ones. Now, this aquifer floor, we need to talk about this for a moment. Every one of these outer tiles here is all marked damp, and every one of them will actually drain water into our fortress. That's bad. We don't want that, so to prevent it, we dig them all out, and we got to replace them all. So the goal here is we're going to remove every single one of these tiles and put a wooden wall in its place. Punch them all out, replace them all. Missed a tile there. We got to clean that up. So dwarves will run upstairs, grab the wood, slap it into place, and at that point these walls are sealed. The walls where those tiles are going up are being sealed away so that they stop leaking. You could do this with a heavy aquifer in theory, but obviously heavy aquifers flood much faster, and this would be problematic. And it's only taken us 3 months to get this far, which is a lot longer than Little buggers are already trying to get in. But all the animals are around the wagon, so they're spotting all these folks. But we kind of need to get stuff indoors. And you have to make sure to get the corners too. Now, you might want to come back later if you want to, maximize your fortress value and do this with gold blocks or something. You can always undo them and replace them. But initially, we're more concerned with speed. Because, frankly, our dwarves are on a timeline, and it ain't looking good at the moment. We'll put a bridge over each one of these. We don't intend to build on them at any point, so bridge will be fine. If we intend to build later, we can come back, remove the bridge, and replace it with flooring. But for now, a bridge will work just fine. Since the bridge is wood, I need somebody to do carpentry labor, and I don't have a dedicated carpenter, so we'll assign our woodcutters to do our bridge building as well. Now, that announcement there, needs bituminous coal, tells me that we have consumed all the coal and made all the coke. Now that we've got some bronze left, but then at that point, everything's been made out of the wagon in terms of iron or in terms of ore that we brought with us. It's all been burned out to where we need it. Uh, we need to go ahead and keep digging these out because there is a lot of aquifer here. Wow. Okay. Wow. Well, get it, boys. Now, notice they turned off wood cutting. You can't be a woodcutter and a miner. There are three jobs, three civilian jobs, that have sort of an invisible uniform attached to them: mining, wood cutting, and hunting, which require tools: pickaxes, axes, and crossbows, and quivers. A civilian cannot pursue any of those three jobs at the same time as another. So you can't have somebody who's a miner and a woodcutter, or a miner and a hunter, or a hunter and a woodcutter. It doesn't work. They can only do one at a time, and they will constantly be swapping equipment if you tell them to try and do both of them. It's really obnoxious. Just don't do that. Instead, you're going to want those guys to be, generally speaking, doing dedicated jobs. So right now, we don't need any more trees cut. We've got plenty of wood upstairs if we need it. Lord, look at all the logs laying around. But we do need to get the digging done, and I have lots and lots of dwarves who could do this labor. They might not do it as well as a super highly skilled legendary miner, but five dwarves goes a whole lot faster than two dwarves, even if two of them are the really skilled ones and two of them are just, or a few of them are just average. Getting our dwarves running in parallel like this will speed up our mining. Now, we should get a run of migrants here soon, I'm hoping. And hopefully, we will be able to assign some of them to mining as well. Oop, idlers. That means we don't have something designated for mining. Because frankly, we don't have a fortress yet. We have a hole in the ground, and it's not even a dry hole in the ground like those hobbits use. Hell no, we have a wet, slimy hole in the ground. This is not good. Now, hopefully, we'll get a nice big migration wave. Probably not, but we can hope. A nice big migration wave would allow us to really put the screws to the mining. Starting to get low on our supplies, of course, because we're running down to the end of our first 3-month cycle here. Now, you do want to be cautious, generally speaking, about trying to do too many jobs vertically above one another. You'll notice the dwarves are running back and forth between floors instead of finishing one out at a time. So there's a little extra travel time if you get too spread out like this. Lots of stuff working against us here. None of it is in our favor. But hey, at least there's no undead. The Kias haven't stolen our only anvil. We didn't embark on a volcano side. Everybody didn't drown come spring when the thaw thawed out underneath the wagon. So, relatively speaking, we're off to a great start. Now, notice up here where we've dug this back and walled it off, no more drip. It's all drying out. Down here, where we're still mining it out, water, water everywhere. Now, it's not what I want long term, but I need a spot to start putting some workshops in so we can get some things built that we absolutely, vitally, critically need, like a carpenter's workshop, and we're going to need a farmer's workshop as well. And let's see, we could stand to have. I think that's everything we need right at the moment. We need to be able to make our milk into cheese, and we need to be able to make some wooden furniture, including beds. Our dwarves are sleeping rough in the mud, and that's no good. No bueno. So we'll get our carpentry going. Hey, thanks, Anonymous. Get our carpentry workshop built. Okay, so now we can make a few beds. Beds can only be made from wood. There is no such thing as an iron bed here in the world unless it's an artifact. Everyone in the world makes beds out of wood. That's just the way that this world works, guys. Get used to it. But we can crank out a bunch of regular quality beds, no problem, and arrange them on the side of the room and call it a dormitory somewhere, and that will get our dwarves a place to sleep. It's not ideal, but it's better than sleeping rough in the mud. And we've got to make sure right now, because we've got everybody working on something. If this is above 0, then somebody is not working. It means we need more tasks to be done. So how many of you out there can actually sing along with this one? Now, spreading it out like this is going to help us prevent the aquifer from flooding downstairs when we get to it. Although there are more tiles that can conceivably generate water, it has to also cover a much broader area, and the light aquifer will generally be unable to do so. It'll still be a slimy hole in the ground, but it'll be slightly harder for it to flood at the bottom. Now, if you were looking to maximize the outflow of your aquifer, you probably want to be digging it out in a checkerboard pattern so as to minimize evaporation by concentrating the water into as few tiles as possible while exposing the maximum amount of surface area to be generating water. Now, these tiles below have completely filled. 7 of 7 is as deep as it gets, so this is effectively a well at this point if I don't do something about it down the road. But for right now, we're just going to make sure we can get this stuff dug out so we're not flooding our fortress. There's a lot of aquifer pumping water in here. Okay, that's enough beds to actually get our dwarves going. Here, I've got to give them a second to actually have have free time to actually come along and collect their things and or collect their beds and put them into place. When you're looking at dwarf therapist, labor to the left is higher priority than labor to the right. Mining is always the first task done, followed by carpentry, followed by bowyery, all the way down the line. Furniture installation is way over here. So for right now, we got to give our dwarves a chance to catch up on their mining to get those levels that we are trying to broaden out cleared out a little further. Okay, looks like that level is probably not nearly as bad in terms of aquifer as the level above it. Okay, go back up here. Yep, they're starting to install the beds. Now, if you're not sure whether a bed has actually been placed or not, you can look. And if it says there's a bed, you can actually look to see, well, what's the contents of that bed, and it will tell you the type of bed that they used. A hazelwood bed of slightly better than normal qualities. There's normal quality, and this is improved a little bit. So these beds aren't the worst. Not the greatest either, but they're okay. We'll just make this a room and make it a dormitory so nobody claims a bed for themselves. And now our dwarves have a place to sleep, which ain't much, but it's better than what we were doing a month ago. And I don't really need that many mason stations per se, but I'm going to do something similar to what I've done for mining here very soon, and we're going to crank out a ton of rock blocks real fast. Okay, and they're starting to get this all dug out finally. Still no migrants. Come on, migrants. In fact, let's go back upstairs. It's probably a good time to get our farmer doing something farming related. Now, what I've set up there is an order for 4 seasons worth of quarry bushes, 4 seasons worth of pigtails, 5 seasons worth of plump helmets, 2 seasons worth of dimple dye, 2 seasons worth of sweet pods, and 2 seasons worth of cave wheat. And this will give us an overabundance of food such that our dwarves will never starve once we get it up and running. But it's going to take us a minute to get to that point. Now, we need to talk a moment about logistics. One of the biggest, nastiest problems that new players run into in a fortress is logistics. And it's not because they're really doing anything as they understand it wrong, it's just that dwarves are stupid. And I say that with all the love in the world. Dwarves are stupid. Here's what I mean. I'm going to set up a set of stockpiles here, and then I'm going to explain why I've done it the way I have. Now, did you see that little bit at the end? It's that bit at the end that's important, but I'll get to that in just a moment. First, our inner stockpile is going to take plants. That means when our farmers are done growing crops, they move a couple steps, they drop it off right here. Bang, done. They go back to harvesting. Bang, bang, bang. Boop, 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 boop. Minimum travel time, as short as I can get it. Um, this isn't actually where we'll store all our plants, but it's where we'll store as many as we need to as a temporary stockpile. Now, this second stockpile here is for seeds, and you'll notice it has no barrels, and it's set to give to this outer stockpile here called uh, food stockpile 3, so it gives to food stockpile 3. Why do I have two stockpiles for seeds and one of them has all the barrels and the other one doesn't? Well, this is to fix an issue that you're going to run into as a player of Dwarf Fortress where the dwarves are not real smart about their logistics. Here's what happens if you build one stockpile with barrels in it to hold your seeds. You've got your farmer's farming, and he goes and he gets a seed to plant, and he runs off to go plant that seed. Meanwhile, some diner down in your dining room is finishing up a plump helmet. He's going to leave a seed behind. So, one of your haulers grabs the barrel full of seeds and takes off to the dining room to pick that seed up and bring it back. Your farmer finishes up his planting and turns around to go grab another seed, and every seed in the fortress is on its way down to the dining room because they're all in the barrel that's being carried by the hauler. You don't want that. Because then the farmer gets all crabby and says, "Hey, I can't plant anything in that tile." And he won't. He'll skip it. He'll cancel that job and move to the next one. And he'll do that over and over again because, well, all the seeds in the fortress are on their way to the dining room. And what's worse is, when your guy gets down to the dining room, picks up his seed, slams it in the barrel, and starts to take it home, he's going to drop it off. And then right about that time, somebody else is going to finish up another plump helmet, and there's going to be another seed to collect. And the process will restart. And all you're going to get is your farmer complaining over and over again that there are no seeds in your fortress when you know full well that there are plenty of seeds in the fortress. The way you prevent that is using this. It's a chain of stockpiles. The inner stockpile will collect the seeds from the dining room. There are no barrels in this stockpile. So they'll be picked up loose and delivered here loose. They'll drop them on the stockpile, and a new job will be created to deliver them to food stockpile 3, which is only a couple steps away. That does have the barrels. And the barrels will be picked up from this stockpile, move a couple of tiles, pick up the loose seed, move a couple tiles back, and drop the seeds off. Now, this doesn't fix the problem 100%. Obviously, during that little 4 tile barrel shuffle, somebody could demand a seed at that exact moment and get all crabby about it. But what you won't have is the situation where your barrels are being hauled up and down the staircases 30 and 40 tiles at a time for one seed each. Instead, those loose seeds will be delivered up here to the farms, and then they'll be delivered to the barrels where they need to be stored. Problem solved. You won't get as many of those crabbygram notifications about barrels. The problem goes away. Additionally, this means that all your barrels will be with full of seeds will be stored directly near the farms where they're going to be used for planting. So now we have all of our seeds on point for where they need to be used. Our farmers are going from a place to plant, pick up a seed, come right back, plant. They can take their seeds from the loose pile if they're laying there. They don't have any problem doing that. But if there's not, they'll take them happily from the barrels and everything's happy. It's all right here in one spot. This farm is set up and done. I don't need to do anything else with it. It's automated. Finished. Farming is done in this fortress. The end. At some point, we're going to have so many plants, I'm going to be baking them into roasts and shipping them off to other people just to get them out of our front door so we don't drown. So let's get the last of this dug out. Now, I need these mason shops because we're going to start cranking out rock blocks to build an outer wall, a perimeter wall for our fortress here. Our miners are going to come along and get this other little section. We'll put another bridge up. And we'll just seal that up right there. And I'll let them get all these mason shops built up. Because we're going to do the same thing for mining that we did or for masonry that we did for mining. I'm going to turn all these guys into temporary masons temporarily, just to get a few blocks cranked out so we can get a wall of stone built as fast as possible. Come on, migrants. Chant with me, boys. We need more slaves. There ain't nearly enough of them here. 7 is not going to build our utopia. And we are going to work these guys within an inch of their lives before we're done. Now, they don't need to do that one, but I want them to go ahead and finish off these floors here, and then we can chisel out those last sections of wall and get those replaced. We've got all this rock just laying around, though, so now's an ideal time to get it used. Now, you'll notice they brought the barrels in with the seeds off the wagon, so all our seeds are here, and our farmer is going to work on the planting now. He'll run around and do all the planting he can do. That's great. We've got him running. Everybody else is doing work. We've got nobody idle. As much as I'd love to let folks take a break right now, we simply don't have the labor for it. Excellent. Excellent. Unfortunately, it may not be many of them. Looks like we're only going to get 2 in this migration wave, which is not nearly what I was hoping for. Not even close. But that's all right. Now remember, we brought all that milk with us for the free barrels. We might as well capitalize on it and make us some cheese. But when we do that, I need to be patient with something here. We need to be careful. Yep, that's what I thought. Okay, so we've got the surface crops, subsurface crops. This will eventually become animal level. And then we've got a level here where we can use as our primary raw food stockpile. Make sure it's set for barrels. Food goes in barrels. And we will set this to take from that plant workshop up above, or the plant stockpile up above. So this is effectively, if you think of it, this entire thing is a big logistics chain. Loose seeds come in this stock in this small stockpiles here. They're moved to the outer stockpiles. They're planted. They grow up. They're harvested. They move here. Then they're taken from this stockpile downstairs to the main stockpile and stored until we'll eventually use them on the floor below in the kitchens, where they'll be cooked into food and dropped to floor down below to be stored in the processed food stockpile. And that's where we'll store those. I think I may have gone a little large on this because I didn't realize I had already dug out the walls for putting the seals around the outside, but I haven't actually done it. So we're going to have to remove the outer edge of this. Okay, because that's where our walls are going to be built. We don't want to have the stockpile occupying that space. You can't build over it. Okay, and as before, we're going to have our dwarves scream out across the surface, grab a bunch of wood, and come down here and slam it in place to keep this aquifer from flooding everything. Well, Frauder, welcome aboard. We're a little behind schedule in terms of where we should be because this aquifer was a whole lot deeper than I was hoping it would be. It's about 6 or 7 levels deep now. I haven't checked. I have to go count it up. But yeah, it's set us back a little on our progress here. Oh, we'll conquer the water. The only question is whether we'll do it before the goblins get here. We've already had thieves show up and try to steal our bronze tools we were making upstairs. Our first wave of migrants has been a measly 2, so we don't have enough manpower to really uh, parallelize the digging that I need to get done. We're behind where we should be. Now, the clever folks among you are wondering why, if I can use wooden walls for all this sealing up I'm doing here, can I not use wooden walls on the surface? And you can, as long as you make sure that you are literally boxing yourself in and not simply creating a wooden palisade. Wooden walls can be scaled, and block walls are much, much more difficult. Now, you can work around this by, say, having an overhang at the top of your wall. So your wall goes up 2 or 3 stories, and then at the top, there's an overhang that juts out so that anybody who climbs up has nowhere to go. That helps. But if you want to do a stone wall, like a proper dwarf on the surface, then we really need to have stone blocks because raw, rough stone is easier to climb than cut stone blocks, as you might imagine. So when we've got them laid in, it'll be harder for things to climb. Then on top of that, we'll still do the overhang because I'm safety and security conscious. But initially, we need to make sure we can get that initial block wall up because that will help keep intruders to a minimum and make those who get in less likely to be willing to stick around. If a goblin has to go and climb 3-story walls before he gets into the fortress, he's not really as capable of fighting on the other side. And as before, oh, that reminds me. The two new dwarves who arrived are both miners, so we're good. They're already off in mining. We should have enough picks, I think, to equip everyone. Best laid plans of men and dwarves, as it were. And we're starting to cut into our drinks, so we need to make sure our dwarves can brew more. That means getting a couple of stills up and running. Now, our farmer is probably, let's check on him. Yeah, he's still planting. But all these other guys need jobs to do, so we need to make sure we've got. Oh, see, I missed a tile there. Okay, and a wall around that floor. Need to give them a moment because they're still finishing up this one tile here. There we go. Okay, we're gaining on it. Let them have a minute to put wood in slots here. And somebody's pet got in the way, so we're going to have one of these got disabled, and we're going to have to re-enable it here. And as they whittle the number down, it was looking like this was the one that they hadn't done. We won't just conquer the water, though. We'll be bending it to our will later. It will serve us, as all things serve dwarves. But first, we've got to get a goddamn fortress dug out. uh, so remember, we didn't bring any plants with us to brew. So as of now, we're getting really low on drinks, and our food stockpiles are low. We have nothing to brew. That's what we brought with us. That's okay. What we're going to do is we're going to assign our farmer, who is probably still planting seeds at this moment, to switch over momentarily and stop planting, or we'll assign our migrants to pick plants, which is what we'll actually do. Pull these two guys off mining, put them on plant gathering. They're going to run around and start harvesting all these crops for us. Now, they won't be really good at it. They'll fail a lot. They won't actually produce stuff a lot of the time. That's okay. Some of the stuff they produce won't actually be food. That's okay too. We need to be prepared for that, so we're not waiting till the last moment when we're actually starving here to start going for food. You got to have a little more preparation than that, but not a lot. If we were embarking in a desert where there was lots of sand, but not a lot of crops, you couldn't pull this same trick off. So keep in mind, I'm aware of where I'm going, what I'm getting myself into a bit. Although I wasn't, again, planning on the 6th floor aquifer. There are always surprises. Now, one nice thing you can do with Dwarf Fortress is I can tell it to dig out the walls on this floor, like I'm doing here. And then I can go down several floors and include them all in that same designation. And they will mine all of them out at once. So I can box this section here, go up a couple floors, and it will mine all of that out for me at one go. It'll basically have it as one designation. This allows you to designate your mining areas in 3 space, while your dwarves carry them out in 2 space. And now, as you can see, our two amateur plant gatherers have already started to gather plants. Now, those may not be brewable plants, so that may not have helped us yet. We'll see. No, see, we're still needing some drink-producing plants here. But they'll get there. There'll be some goodies in that pile. Okay, now our farmer has planted stuff in all of these, so he's been really busy. Here in a second, he's going to run out of seeds for all the different plant types he's got because there's only so many he can actually plant. And once that happens, he'll go topside with his friends and start helping them pick plants. And that will be a drinks stockpile. And so what do we got here? This will need to be prepared food. So we go down to food, we disable, oops, we enable food, we block everything, we enable prepared food. So this is just prepared food here. So raw food up here, prepared food here, drinks there, and then down here is where we're going to build our initial dining room. Down below the aquifer, where it's dry and we don't have to mess with it yet. All right, so this is as much as our dwarves have actually constructed. They've managed to get 5 tables and 2 chairs built. But I want to lay this whole dining room out. I don't want to wait around for my dwarves to figure out how to make, stone furniture. So I'm going to turn planning mode on. This is another DF hack feature here. And once that's on, I can tell them to just go ahead and start building. Now, I don't care what they put in here. Right now, the only furniture I'm making is stone furniture. I want it exactly where I'm putting it. We'll come back and pretty it up later, but for right now, any quality will do, decorated or not, any material, I don't care. Tables and chairs, tables and chairs, tables and chairs. Now, we only made 10 of each, so this is as many as they'll build at all. We will work on work orders in a moment, but for right now, I need to give my dwarves a chance to catch up. We're quite a bit behind because of that aquifer. Autumn already. We don't have a trading depot. Still no, huh, guys? I'd really love to know what kind of plants you're managing to pick, that you've managed to pick 60 non-brewable plants, but haven't managed to find a single one you can make alcohol out of yet. It's quite impressive. Especially since I'm pretty sure some of these are going to be... Wow, are they all saplings? I mean, that's raspberry bushes. I know you can brew raspberries. Come on. Now, we have barrels because we have all that milk that we freed up by making cheese, remember? And we should get somebody brewing here, I'm hoping. Make sure somebody's coming along to do the labor here in just a sec. Because I think both our brewers are also gatherers, and they may be busy doing other things. So we'll have the doctor make his own disinfectant. Just kidding. Dwarves don't actually use alcohol as disinfectant, but it is kind of funny. Okay, and now that they're starting to get furniture into what will eventually become our dining room, and now we have a meeting area. So this stockpile is a temporary stockpile. I need to house everything under the sun, basically. Anything that's in the wagon, I want it dragged down here and stored. This is the time to get everything indoors. We've got to get our block wall up, and we've got to get it up now. And they are running out the last of the masonry jobs as we speak. Once those are done, we'll have all these workshops freed up, and we'll get them underway. You'll notice all the animals are now moving indoors. In order to avoid that, we're going to build a pasture space on the roof here where they can graze in contentment and stay out of the dining room. Now, that won't matter for the birds or the dogs or the cats, but it does matter for all of those grazing animals we brought with us. So for now, all of them in one pasture. You're right, there's no trade depot. I should have remedied that sooner. Because we are going to rob the caravan today, boys and girls. Frankly, for the hell they're putting us through, they owe us. You'll notice I haven't assigned a trader yet. We're not going to trade. We're just going to build a depot and then let them deal with it. Let's take a look what's in the wagon. Thread, yarn, our plaster, and sandbags. Let's see. Some logs, some empty barrels. So not a whole lot. Most of the stuff's already been dragged inside, so that's good. And the first section of wall. And everybody's in their pasture spaces. And we've run out of things to store our brewed drinks in, but we've got 100 plants and 100 drinks now, which is far more than we brought with us. Far, far, far more. So our food supplies are handled for a while, which is good. And then there was the moment where I realized I was actually building staircases and not a wall. Okay, and give them a minute to get caught up on some jobs here, because we're still running everybody hell bent for leather. Okay, our flooding seems to be under control for the moment, so I'm going to let these guys get a little time cranking some blocks out, and then we have to get that wall up. Now, as far as people we could have brought with us, we could have brought some higher skilled miners, but let's take a look for a moment. Our two high skilled miners who started out with a 2 each are already an 11 and a 10, respectively. We've had to do so much mining to clear out this aquifer at this point that it has literally dominated all of the labor I have done for everybody, pretty much. Our stone crafter is only still a stone crafter by virtue of having had so many points into it, etc., etc. That's going to be true of all of our crafters. If I hadn't put 5 points in, like this armorer, I wasn't expecting him doing this much mining, so he's already probably now become a miner rather than an armor smith. Our glassmaker is still a glassmaker, fortunately. We'll make sure we have plenty of people doing architecture still. Okay. Bridges, like forges, have to be architected before they will actually be constructed. So there's several phases. Materials are brought, then the architecture is laid out, then the materials are brought, and then the materials are constructed, and then you have a bridge. Blocks, yep, blocks, blocks. Good. In this corner, because this block is out over nothing, I have to build out to it so that they'll build in this corner. Otherwise, I'd have to build a floor here, let them build the corner block, remove the floor, and then build the wall in its place. By doing it this way, temporarily building this floor out and giving them this area, they will construct all of these pieces. They'll do the corners from the outside if they have to. If I want them to do the corners from inside, say for example, because this was all up in the air out here on an upper floor, I'd have to leave the inner corners here like this exposed momentarily while I completed the outer corner block, and then then backfill to fill in this last block. This will allow them to use these blocks that they've now produced, over 100 already. 4 miners going to town. Each boulder they build up is 4 blocks, 25 boulders, no problem, because we have all this stone just laying around from all the mining we've had to do. Now we just need to get people to build it all. So we need to give them a minute to get caught up. And we're going to start on the moat. Now, that ding right there is the sign that we want to do something immediately. And that something is, since these guys are dwarves, we want to come over here to this depot right here. that we haven't actually bothered to trade at, and we need to hit remove building. It's going to warn us that, oh, these merchants are going to lose profits. That's okay. Screw those guys. We need the stuff. Someone should, we hope, come along and disassemble this. If not, you may need to make sure that there's nobody who has any other labors. So I don't see anybody disassembling here. I see idlers. Why is there an idler but nobody disassembling? What is wrong here, George? Nope. That guy has one job. One job. And he's eating a meal, so we need to get somebody else to do it. Damn it. Figures. Now, this is important for us because we are vitally short on supplies. So we really do actually need that stuff. I mean, we could get along without it. We've got plenty of food. We could wall ourselves in and seal ourselves off. But, well, let me be frank. I think they owe us. The geological survey team was a little lacking this time out. No, disassemble. Cannot believe he's not going to get it done. Are you kidding me? Wow. Dude, you had one job. One job. Well, okay, if they get away, it's no big deal. We'll live. Would have liked their stuff, though. So traditionally, I do take their first wagon. They make up for it later because after that, we're going to have so much stuff coming out of our ears, we can afford to make them gifts of valuable goodies out our wazoo just to get them off our front porch. In future years, they will be paying us to haul away our garbage. Let's not. Do we have to? Okay, much to share. Yep. What do we want? So, early on there's a few things that we will find difficult to get and that we could theoretically make use of. Metal bars, particularly of weaponable metals, iron, steel, copper, bronze, and their amalgams, to make bronze. So for copper, that is to say tin. A few bars of those, stone, flux. Um, those things are heavy, though, unfortunately. Gems is where we'll make a lot of our money long term. Small cut gems can be slotted into all the trade goods and trinkets we churn out by our gem setters, and we can basically bring in a gem of whatever quality and turn around and slap it in some gewgaw and put it back up for sale and end up making a huge profit on the turnaround. But early on, we need a few essentials more than anything else. We'll go ahead and get all the seeds we can get because we want to be able to build up a stockpile for our farms. Although we're only going to really use about 50 at most per season, it doesn't hurt to have a few bags of seeds just laying around in case something goes wrong. We could use a couple of extra anvils. We're not going to have a weaponsmith up and running just yet, but we could use a couple. Don't need them, but it'd be nice to have, and they're not too expensive. Let's see here. Powders. Gypsum plaster is always hard to come by. Milk is a little more expensive after embark because they'll charge us for the barrel, but we can do the same thing to turn it into cheese as before, and it's still pretty cheap. Thread is a good buy because they will bring it to us and we don't have to go find it. Sand will get us bags. Not for free. We'll have to pay for the bags this time, but that's not terrible. More thread. Okay, now when it comes to leather, keep your leather types reasonable. You don't want to be ordering crazy types of leather. Order those leathers that you know are reasonable and normal. Dogs, cats, mules, horses, donkeys, cows, pigs, sheep, goat, chicken, all good. Okay? We don't need a huge variety of types. This is going to be more than enough, and it covers all the types of, with the exception of the bird, it covers all of the animals that we will commonly have and therefore be producing leather of normally. Dwarf Fortress tracks an incredible number of leather types. I mean, all these different leathers, and some of them are more valuable than others, and yada, yada, yada. We really don't care. We want just basic leathers to equip our guys or to make our items, and that's it. We don't need some exotic, expensive leather. There's enough to keep track of. We're not going to care. So, metal bars, let's talk. We can get only a handful of these every time, but it doesn't hurt to order, well, all of them really. If somebody's going to freak out and have a mood, we might as well have a little of everything on hand. Likewise, having some small cut gems available next time would mean that if we get a mood that needs gems, we've got them available. And ordering them while they charge us a premium to deliver them for us means that we're not mining out space in our basement to find them. And you can order diamonds and things that don't appear in our area in the first place. You're highly unlikely to find black diamonds, no matter how much you dig around on our site. But we can apparently order them from the liaison, so let's do that, and we'll have them on site. Now, that pretty well covers in terms of what we want. We don't need for much. We will make the things we want. But animals are good to have, especially females of the species if you intend to reproduce them. Mules are just basically meat that you can keep around. More sheep, more pigs. Let's see. And we want to get a few more of the blue peahens as well. Uh, that's just to help get our animal industry up and running. Once they get a supply built up of female adults, it's not difficult to keep your population pretty much wherever you want it. We won't be able to do much fishing right off the bat. So there's a lot of ways to prepare for dwarven food. Let's talk about that for a minute. Dwarven food. You can hunt for it. You can fish for it. You can forage for it. You can farm for it. You can trade for it. All of these methods have their strengths and their weaknesses. Farming requires preparation. Fishing and hunting require and foraging require generally that your dwarves be exposed to the outside. So there are ways to work around that, but for the most part, you're going to be exposing your dwarves to danger if they're using these methods to gather food. Um, most of these methods can't provide enough food for a fortress. Fishing can until you exhaust your fish. Trade can if you are constantly ordering food and if they bring enough. But farming is going to be the one that you'll go to most of all. Animal husbandry will help, especially later on once you have a substantial meat industry built up. You'll be churning out a fair bit of that as well. But farming is far and away the primary way which dwarves will sustain themselves. So it's important for new players to understand that get in, get an area dug out, make sure it's suitable for planting crops on, put a plot down, start getting crops ready because long term, while you can assuage some temporary shortfalls with things like foraging or hunting, it's not reliable long term for a fortress wide feed. Trade is the other one. Now, you can You can trade for food, but the problem is then you're dependent on on the other races, and if they declare war on the dwarves, well, there went your food supply. So farming, 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 farming. Now, remember, we harvested all those crops, right? So he's telling us what he'll charge us for all the stuff, which is basically if we ask for it, they charge us more. Let's see. Rock mugs. Check that out. They're going to pay almost 200% of normal price for rock mugs. Boys, it looks like everything we want to buy is back on the menu. Because we are going to make rock mugs. Oh, we are going to start making rock mugs soon. Okay, well, rock mugs, prepared meals, these are good. Earrings and figurines and amulets aren't bad either. Legwear is either clothing that we want to keep for our dwarves or armor that we want to keep for our dwarves. Tanned hides aren't all that valuable and they don't have quality levels, so the fact that they're paying more for them isn't super valuable, and we can't produce a whole lot of them right now anyway. Cloth is something we import to make things out of. Sheets are something we import to make things out of. Um, so rock mugs is I mean if he'd asked for I don't know rings maybe but 190%. The only thing he's selling for more is cut gems, and cut gems are an intermediate product for us. We put those into something. We don't sell them raw. So rock mugs is our good choice for export here. Earrings would be a good second choice. Okay, so let's get that started. And then we've got several floors down here we're going to have to drain off, which kind of sucks. But we can deal with that. So let's talk about disposing of water. There's a few ways to dispose of it, and we'll actually use several of them. Here, since it's an easy one to set up, the quickest way for me to get this running would be to simply drain it out to a long, tall way like this, let the water flood down the hallway and spread out and evaporate. As long as it gets down to one depth at several points along the way, over time it will tend to evaporate. The twos will fall into the holes, those twos will become ones, and the water will gradually work its way down. If you cut it too fine and your water ends up at depth 2, then you have to use a wider space to keep spreading it out. This is effectively like an evaporation pond. Now, that works for small amounts, but for larger amounts, you're going to need a couple of different ways to get rid of it, and most of those involve some sort of drain. Now, what I'm doing here is really just to spread the water out. I'm really just digging this tunnel so that when I make this connection, the water from these tiles will just flood down this hallway and spread out. Um, we're not looking at that much water, and this should be more than enough. Even if it's not, what I can do then is smooth and cut a fortification in this last tile out here that I can't actually dig. You can't actually dig the last tile, but a smooth fortification is a hole in the wall, basically, and so any water that's in this tunnel would be able to flow right out that hole and right off the map and be gone. That drain allows you to drain as much water as you can drain as wide as that tunnel can get. So if you have a 5 wide tunnel, it can drain a lot of water off the map over time. You can drain it into the caverns. The caverns have connections off map, for example, and water drained into the caverns will therefore generally flood out of your map. And you can use an in place water destroying drain, which uses a quirk of dwarven physics. We'll get to one of those later when we discuss drowning traps. Oh, he couldn't remove it because it required carpentry and disassembly. That's what it was. I should have looked. Silly me. Oh well. Well, let's get the rest of this wall up here. We've got new migrants coming in, which is good. We'll need to get some more beds up and start working on bigger living quarters for our dwarves here. This looks like it's a much better migrant wave. Much more vibrant, more labor. Okay, now for right now, I've got everybody assigned to just hauling because I want to get everything indoors and moved into uh, its temporary housing. We need to start getting some living space set up for our dwarves, some proper places for them to live because they're going to start getting unhappy. Well, they probably are not super happy right now already, but they need a temple, they need a tavern, they need a dining room, they need furniture, and they need places to do all these things. And so it's our job to get them, and we've been putting it off because of the aquifer for quite a while now. We still need to get our wall up, though. Hopefully, with all these additional migrants, we'll start seeing an explosion of laboring dwarves come dragging a bunch of stone out, and the wall will start to be assembled. Our idle count is low. I mean, basically, as soon as it ticks an idler on, we've got a job for him to do. Okay, now, you might think that this wall makes us safe. You would be very, very wrong. First things first, I've got to remove those temporary sections of floor. But in addition to that, we're excavating around the outer wall to create a moat. And I was starting to talk about moats earlier. Dry moats. Dry moat, dry moat, dry moat. You always want a dry moat. Don't want a wet moat because things can swim in it. Magma moats are better than water moats, but there are a few things that can tolerate magma just fine too. The only things that can cross a dry moat are things that can climb up the far wall and things that can fly. And things that can fly don't fear any moat anyway. So dry moats are superior, sadly. Now, there aren't many things that can cross magma, but there are a few. And so, alas, I can't even recommend those. So, we're going to excavate 5 deep around the outside and put ourselves a little drawbridge up to comprise our temporary entrance. Now, this is not where we'll actually have our primary fortress entrance. This is really a backdoor for our dwarves to use for the first couple of years while we're getting our fortress set up and running. We'll excavate the trees, push them back a bit, excavate out a trench, build a couple of levels of wall up, and maybe just floor this all over and make it just one giant box. Um, at that point, with this sealed up and secure indoors, basically, as it were, we can work on building a proper entrance for our dwarves. Yeah, clowns are definitely immune to magma. You're probably going to run into several forgotten beasts if you look long enough. I don't know if bronze colossuses are or not. Probably not, but there are certainly forgotten beasts that can be made of metals that are. And you could theoretically end up with the leader of a foreign city happening to be a demon, running a goblin civilization, and they could be down to their last limbs and decide to raid you, and he shows up at the head of the raid. So, dry moat, dry moat. Now we are cranking out the blocks, which is good, because I'm going to use a bunch of them for projects down the road. Okay, let's get the rest of those blocks over there removed, because the water froze, and so there's some ice there that needs to be removed. Let's get rid of the trees back away from our walls a little bit, so let's trim back the forest. To make sure we have enough room to dig out. Now, we may not actually be able to do what I had in mind in terms of a moat, because if I go 5 deep around the edge here, I think I'm going to make contact with the river, which would be bad. I don't really want an ice block moat when winter comes. So we may have to do something there where we kind of go short on the moat on that one corner in order to avoid touching the river. We're a little close. Alas, not a perfect build. No, no. Oh, no. Now notice that this bridge is a raising bridge, not a retracting bridge. I do not want the bridge to simply slide into place. I want it to raise up like a traditional castle drawbridge. If you have this as retracting, what you mean is that it's effectively like a diving board that retracts into the side of the wall, and that works perfectly great for bridging the gap, but terrible when you need to seal up the wall. So, in order to keep flyers out long term, we need this to be a raising bridge so that it will become a wall across these 3 tiles once it's raised. Now, we don't have any way to raise it yet. We haven't built a mechanics workshop or any mechanisms, so that's next on our list. But we need to have a way for our dwarves to get in and out once this moat is too deep for them to simply go down the ramp and come up the other side. Pudding stone. That's why we have so much of aquifer. We must have built in the most weepiest, drippiest. We're gonna have to be pumping out our mines before we're done. That's gonna be fun. Pudding stone. Wow. I think I've seen that all of twice. Nice. Okay, so, and I don't mean nice the rock. Okay, we'll use our pudding stone here to make our bridge. It's not magma safe, but it'll be a nice stone bridge nonetheless. Now, once that's up, we have a way in and out, so our dwarves won't have any problems there. Let's look up north, make sure the wagon's emptied out. Make sure we've got everything there. Still some thread and yarn. Need to make sure I have a depot or slots in the stockpile for that. Sandbags, same thing. I need to make sure I've got that turned on. And silk thread, okay. So let's go down to our temporary stockpile down there in the wet. Oh, what did we fill it up with? Oh, blocks. That's right, because we don't have any bins yet. That's on me. I didn't think about that. We need to fix that problem. So let's pause the game here for a moment. Talk about storage. Normally, items are stored one per tile. So you can only store as many items as you have tiles. That's terrible. Well, sort of. Dwarf Fortress actually is smart about this, and it allows your dwarves to make bins, and the bin can be the item on the tile, and then the bin can contain stuff. And that's really what you want long term. We didn't actually set that stockpile up to take bins properly, and we haven't built any bins anyway, so it wouldn't have mattered. Let's get some bins up. And I don't really want to do that job now, so we're going to go back up there and turn off the do it now. Okay, and that will get us some bins that we can use for storage. Now we'll go back down to our little damp stockpile here and make sure it's got bins turned on so that they will load the stuff into bins once the bin becomes available. Pretty sure we have somebody doing carpentry. Yep, there he goes. Good, good. So now we'll start to make the bins we need. Check on our food stocks. Doing good there. Okay, still need to finish up our wall. Still need to finish up here and here and here. And then we're down to the dry area again. Okay, good. Not great. Good. barracks, temple, library, tavern. Where our dwarves who have to control all the misfits are going to be. Where all the public misfits are going to be. Nobody other than dwarves has any reason to be in these hallways any further than right there. So everything further in, we're going to set up special access here with guard doors or guard doors with dogs and traps. Nobody's got any other reason to be any further in than that. So the only reason anybody's in there further is we've allowed them. Um, we then have to set up like rooms, tavern rooms. So off of here, up in this area here, we'll have a little area for any guests we do allow to stay. We'll have a little tavern room area up here for themselves. Okay, let's get them to work. Wow, it is really going to make me do this on every tile here, isn't it? We will endure. Oh no, it's going to decide that all of this is aquifer too, huh? Okay. Wow. I'm actually not sure we're going to be able to do this. I'm thinking the pudding stone may be leaking from above here. Okay, so plan B. Wall it off, go down a level, do it there. We can still make that work. Now we built that wall across there. I need to make sure that no dwarves lock themselves in. It is possible for a dwarf to wall themselves off. Normally, if you build this wall like this and then you build a second wall here and you suspend this wall, they will stand in the right place not to lock themselves in. But dwarves are stupid. Trusting them to do it right is madness. Madness. This is eventually going to fill up with a big pocket of water here, which is going to be fun, but, that's okay. Won't hurt us in any way. Will be a little annoying because we'll have to dig under it here. So we'll get some cancellations as we dig underneath the area that is now wet above it here. But as long as this level is all phyllite, we should be okay. I see a few of you out there have come back again. Welcome back, guys. We're well behind where I would normally want to be heading into late September here now. Yeah, oof. Let's get a couple of mechanics workshops going because I don't really care that the mechanisms are high quality. I just care that somebody's got a few of them made. And then we'll need to make somebody a mechanic. They can all be mechanics. I don't care. We need to get several mechanisms made. And our mechanisms here are going to serve to give us a way to articulate this bridge. Because right now it's just a drawbridge that doesn't raise. So that's not going to do any good to keep people out. They can just go right across it, and we have no way to raise it. Not good. Now I'm going to do the tavern square rather than round because we're going to allow for a large squarish dance floor with a packed in set of tables and chairs. And if I just use a round area with lots of tables and chairs spread around it, you end up with no area for the dance floor that the tavern really needs. And now that I think about it, I was planning to put a little line of sight break in there, wasn't I? Well, we'll just do it this way. This is mostly to keep any fire of crossbows and the like that might be. But we've got to dig under that earlier flooding area there, so we've got to go around that. Don't have a hospital yet. Oof, so far behind. There. Now that they're free of the actual area above where the water is, none of this is considered damp anymore because it's not adjacent to water. So they'll dig all that out and then we can come back and clean up the little spot that's missing. All right, and now we are off to the races. An area to put our depot in, barracks where we'll start training troops. This will eventually go up to a spiral ramp, which will lead to the surface and will provide access for surface dwellers to reach our domain. Now, this area on the surface is not useless to us. In order to keep dwarves from becoming cave adapted, we're going to actually set this area up as a statue garden, and then find out whether Toady actually has it set up to allow dwarves to visit statue gardens anymore. By visiting the statue garden, they'll be exposed to sunlight regularly. By being exposed to sunlight regularly, won't build up the illness that causes them to vomit everywhere when they come up on the surface if they haven't seen the sunlight in several years. Nowhere near where I expected us to be, though, I will admit. So far behind. Crafts Dwarves workshops handle wood crafting, stone crafting, bone crafting. A lot of the artistic work our dwarves will be doing will be done on this floor right here, where it'll be nearby to where we'll doing exports. Okay, come on, guys, get that thing ready. We need to get a temple up quick. We're way behind on everything. Now, what we're going to do here is we're going to, well, we're going to take advantage of the game a little. We're going to set up an area here that is a set of temples all stacked on top of one another, each zone one on top of the other, all with the furniture inside them. Okay, and then we can set our tavern up over here. All right, so we're coming up on 10 o'clock, guys. Let's take a look here. Wait, what do we got? Visiting. Yeah, they've come to see our magnificent rock temple that we've just excavated, our hole in the ground that's doubling as our temple. So all of our unhappy dwarves, oops, we've got looks like we've got some animals here we need to take care of real quick. Let's go do that. A couple of new animals that arrived with the migrants, which we didn't assign. So we had a buffalo cow that's wandering around down there starving to death because there's no grazing down in that stone room. Okay, so now let them get that last room excavated out, and we're probably going to call it there. I won't dedicate these last rooms yet. We'll need to do the temple, and we'll need to do the library next time. Okay, so before I go for the evening, guys, anybody got any questions on why I was doing something the way I did it? Something you want to see in a future stream? Questions about Dwarf Fortress in general? Wow, the tin garlic, that's really your name? Really? You can do better than that. Yeah, that'll do. Okay, so now we'll have to get furniture moved in here and supplies moved in for our tavern. We've got our temple up. It's a shrine. It's not real valuable at the moment. We'll need to get that prettied up. We'll need to get our library set up and start working on bookbinding and so forth. But along the way, we've got a whole lot of industries that have got to get set up. We've got our uh, leak that we're still going to have to deal with, on these upper floors that hasn't been walled off yet completely. So some of this is still slowly flooding. And then down here, did they actually get this done? Yes, yes. Okay, so let's show that tonight while we're at it, just to make sure that we show what's going on here. Normally, I only have one engraver or two engravers running, but right now I want to make sure I get somebody to do this job, and I'm not worried about the quality, just that it gets done. Now our little dwarf's going to come running along, and he'll smooth that wall out. And right after he's done, actually, in order to keep him there a little longer and slightly improve the effectiveness of our drain, we're going to tell him to smooth all of it, even though we really only need the one tile. We'll get several dwarves down here, and that's fine. And then we're going to carve a fortification in that smoothed tile. And dwarves will come along, stand there in a big pile, smooth some stone, and cut a fortification. Now that fortification is going to be our drain off map. Once that's done, or even started really, we can, there we go. Go ahead and punch the hole here. And our miner will come along, and he may have a little bit of problem with the flooding momentarily when he gets to that point, but he'll survive because there's plenty of places for the water to go. And the water in our staircase will drain out into this hallway, spread out, and it probably won't even make it as far as the drain. I'm really being overly cautious. But all that water that flooded down here, several floors of it now, has to go somewhere, and so it's going down the hallway. If there were enough water pressure, it would actually flood back up this staircase, but there's not. So it's going to try and spread out on this floor first, and since there's more than enough room for it to spread out, it will never actually rise back up. Now, that's not safe for fortress plumbing, but for our drain, that's good enough. And the water will trickle out, and the dwarves will start excavating those rooms that they could not reach earlier because we had flooded the staircase. And we still haven't gotten to the caverns. I guess we could do that real quick while we're at it. Got our farms up and running, which is good, but we haven't actually started our pasture spaces. Winter, and we don't have pasture spaces up. Oh, oi, oi. Just that outside box up top. We're living like troglodytes. Okay, once the water gets a little lower so we're not getting any fours in here anymore and spreads out. And it'll keep spreading out. There we go. That'll do it. And we'll just give it the little extra kick in the pants it needs. We'll mine this all out. Finish spreading it out completely. Now our miners are kind of getting knocked around by the water flood here, but slowly it's starting to get to where there's no water coming down that hallway so much. Just the occasional trickle. And now you see it's dried up. The water's coming down there, coming down so slowly that it can't even sustain. Or did we go down a level? Oh, we did. That was dumb. I did. Oops. Oops. Now the water can backflow into that hole and cause the same damn problem again. Clever, clever. Okay, well, I guess we can fix that problem, though. Silly me. Okay, well, first things first. To fix that problem, we'll have to make a corkscrew and a pipe section. And we can make them out of several things, but wood is usually relatively available, and wood is perfect for this because we're only pumping water and not magma. Don't use wood if you plan to be pumping something, hot. Water, water's a-okay. We'll make our two little wooden parts. We'll build ourselves a little screw pump, and we'll pump the water out of our little staircase hole there and back over towards the water. Once we've got that drilled out a little bit and pumped dry, it should be no problem. Do the second one, or is he on his way? Bucket, bucket, word corkscrew. So no, he hasn't finished the second one yet. I didn't think he had. There he goes. And that'll get our pipe section done. So now we've got this flood of water. It's just a little too deep to actually do anything in. So what do you do with that? Well, you build a screw pump. With those two wooden pieces and a block. And once that's built, we'll pump it dry. Need our mason to come along. We've got several masons, so hopefully somebody's coming along. Come on, guys. We're going to have to assign the entire fortress to do this temporarily. We're going to have to start specializing our guys. You know how we got all these dabbling people doing all this stuff? We've been so busy getting our emergency constructions and bits done that we haven't done anything else. Now, I've told them to start pumping, which is great, but I didn't tell who can run the pump. Everyone is now qualified to operate a pump. Oh, is it not going to do it? We can fix it. We can fix it. And they'll pump that water out. There we go. A cave. Now, that's a good thing for us. So let's go back up one step here. Yep, a couple levels down. Hopefully nobody gets washed down there. That would be bad. Let them do their thing here. And we'll turn them into up staircases instead of up downs. We just want the one way. Get those all mined out. Bang, bang, bang. Done. Okay. Looks like they screwed up and did several of these as up downs instead of ups, but we'll fix that problem. Oh, no, we allowed them to continue below where they should have. Oops, that was on me. So to fix that problem, we'll drill them out and rebuild them. We'll just drill this all out. Doop, doop, doop. Rebuild them with some of that stone we've been pulling in all this time. Now, once we've made a connection to the caverns, we can seal it back off. That's perfectly fine. We're not using it as a drain right now, so that we don't need a connection. And we want to replace these so that nothing comes up through the bottom of our fortress hallway here. And I'm kind of keeping an eye on this because I want to make sure this gets walled up. While this first cavern is not especially dangerous, and it's unlikely there's any flying beast just lurking around waiting to come in and cause hell, it's entirely possible for you to have something flying sitting right there just waiting on you to make this connection. Some creatures are really good at climbing. Theoretically, they could climb up here. Oop, gotta unpause if I want them to actually do it, don't I? Ha ha. Okay. And once they have finished those two staircases, we will have made a connection to the caverns and then sealed it back up. Okay, now what does that get us? Well, a couple of things. First off, it gets us cave moss. So up here, remember we were talking about we've got our pasture up here, and then we've got farm, and then we're going to do animals. Well, you got to have a place to graze your animals, and that means cave moss. And so already you can see muddy, sparse floor fungus. That fungus acts just like grass for purposes of grazing. So we'll move our workbenches out, we'll excavate some space here in this dirt layer, and seal it back up with walls if we need to keep it from flooding. And then we'll stash our animals in there. The grazers will have grazing space. The ones that don't need to graze will have nest boxes or similar facilities, and just let them reproduce. Yank them out and butcher them down when we need the meat or the other products, or pull them out to milk them, whatever we need. This floor will handle all of our animal processing. Raw food, kitchens and stills, cooked food, drinks, and then a couple of extra floors for workshops, temporary stockpile, dining room, public areas, and crafts dwarfs workshops. And we've got a lot more stuff to build. We're not anywhere near a completed fortress yet. We are way behind because of all of that aquifer digging. Oof, so many floors. Normally, we would have skipped over these floors early on. We wouldn't have had to dug out the extra space for the walls to pack them back in, and we wouldn't have had to dig out so many of these empty floors that we really aren't using much of the space yet. We would have skipped them by and come back for them later, and we would be much further ahead in terms of construction. So, next time we've got to get caught up. We've got to get our bridge linked up. We've got to get to where we can seal our fortress off and hopefully keep out invaders, or at least make it more difficult for them to get in. Um, so next time we're going to be looking at defense and trade goods to get started, and living quarters. Defense, trading space, and living quarters. All right, guys. So tomorrow night at let's do it at 7 o'clock Eastern again, and I will see you then, and we'll do another session then. All right. Now, before you go, let's see who's out there playing Dwarf Fortress. All right. So it looks like we've got somebody doing a solo dwarf here. This ought to be interesting. We'll see what his challenge run looks like. All right, guys, and I will see you tomorrow.